Assalamu alaikum, Tayab. Thank you so much for joining us.
Salam. Thank you for inviting me. Great to hear from you, Hussam.
And just to introduce Tayab to those of you who don't know him, he is a partner and leading human rights lawyer at Bindmans and the director of ISG, the International Society of Justice for Palestine. Have I got that right?
International Centre of Justice for Palestinians.
Center for Justice in Palestine. Tayyip has acted in many of the most high-profile and complex criminal trials over the last 2 decades. He's represented clients in the Supreme Court, the European Court of Human Rights, as well as international political and legal institutions at the United Nations, International Criminal Court, and the African Commission for Human Rights. Tayyip was shortlisted as the Human Rights Lawyer of the Year in the Law Society's Excellence Award and nominated as Criminal Defense Lawyer of the Year. And he's regarded as ranked in band 1 of international law and chambers and partners. So basically, you don't really want to mess with him. But he's the perfect man for the conversation that we are about to embark on, which is regarding the legality of what is going on and some of the implications. And I guess the first question that I had for you, Tayyab, was, there has been a lot of talk about whether Israel has been committing war crimes. So to many people listening today, what is the position? Have we got some clarity on whether that is the case?
Yeah, I think just carrying on from Hussam's points that he made, and before I come to the position with international law and Israel, I just want to make an initial comment. And it was really touching to hear Hussam, as a Palestinian ambassador to the UK, speak about the Muslim community in the United Kingdom. And I felt really proud listening to him reflect on where we are as Muslims in different aspects of society in the United Kingdom, from the very top of politics and law and medicine and science, doing every job that is needed in this country, whatever that might be. We commit to those jobs. We integrated. We did what was required of us. I was born in Yorkshire. I was brought up in Yorkshire. I'm in my profession, I'm considered one of the leading voices in criminal and international law. And I think one message I'd like to give to the people listening before we talk about the law is it's time to own this issue. We don't have to be apologists for being here. We don't have to apologize for having a view. We don't have to apologize for making the British values dear to us as Muslims in this community and thinking that actually they matter to us potentially more than they do to some of our politicians, which I'll come to in some of what I've got to say. One thing I want to make very clear to the people listening here is that if we as the Muslim community, and I'm speaking as a Muslim as opposed to a lawyer at the moment, if we as the Muslim community cannot get this issue right for Palestinians, then we will lose our rights and the ability to speak for our rights for generations to come. And what Hussam is seeing is the success of British Muslims integrating in the UK will be undone forever actually, because for the Palestine issue is one of the things that as human beings, as Muslims, we find really important and something that we need to really help with, not because we see Muslims necessarily being mistreated and subjugated, because we see human beings being mistreated and subjugated. We had the same kinds of feelings in other parts of the world, like the Ukraine, for example, where we saw people being occupied, people being killed by a larger power. We supported the rights of those individuals to not be treated in that way. So I just want to make sure that I set up by finishing off what Hussam said and so explaining how important that is for us. We don't have to apologize for having the views that we have. And hopefully some of the questions that, Zara, you asked me and I answer will help fuel some of our advocacy and empower some of Muslims in this country and others that are listening in order to deal with our political, our politicians, our political class. So your question to me was about Israel and whether they were committing war crimes or not. Well, it's really important that when we apply the law as lawyers and as Muslims, we must do this without bias. It's really important, because we accuse the international community of ignoring the plight of Palestinians. We've accused them of doing this for decades. Now, we can't be guilty of the same. So listen to me very carefully when I say this. We must be clear that the taking of life outside of the rule of law should be condemned. We say this. We say it whether it's a Palestinian or an Israeli that commits the crime. This is clear to us. The taking of hostages is a crime, and people should be released where they have been captured unlawfully. Now, just listen to what I said and see how easy it was for me to say. And it was easy for me to say it because it's the truth. We condemn unlawful acts as human beings, as Muslims, and as a lawyer. I condemn them, right? And this is not a trick question, because Ari didn't ask me that question, right? But I thought it was really important to answer it, because a lot of the times people get a little bit worried about, oh my God, I'm being asked to condemn the killings of Israelis on October. It's easy to do. It was wrong. That what happened to Israelis on October the 7th was wrong. We can condemn that. That's straightforward. That's straightforward. But then the question needs to be asked, if it's so easy to condemn unlawful acts that are done by Palestinians in that situation, why is it so difficult for many in the international community to condemn the clear violations of international law committed by Israel? Why is there not this equivalence, as Hussam put it, this equality in application of the law? It's important to remember that the criminal acts of one party in any event does not justify the criminal acts of another, and can never be justified on civilians that were not even involved in that in the first place. Palestine is a state party to the Rome Statute. Now, what does that mean? That means that it has accepted the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court, and any crime perpetrated in that region can be prosecuted at the ICC. Israel claims that it can carry out its huge bombing campaign on Gaza because of the actions of Hamas. Many Israeli commentators, supported by politicians, have argued that Israel can take any action it deems fit in response to the 7th October attack. This is not correct in law, and it fails to meet the test of distinction and proportionality in international law. The laws of wars are called international humanitarian law and require that a party to an armed conflict distinguishes between civilians on one hand and combatants on the other. Not doing so is a war crime. International law prohibits, I'm just making these points really clearly so people can understand what the issues are. International law prohibits a blockade of essential life-sustaining supplies such as food and water. Israel has done that. It is unlawful to prevent or interfere with the free flow of humanitarian aid. And Israel has done that. And sending 20 trucks in is a drop in the ocean by most UN commentators. It's not sufficient to save life in that region. It's unlawful to forcibly transfer civilian populations. All of these examples constitute war crimes, and the evidence is building that Israel has engaged in these activities. Finally, today, the United Nations Secretary General has confirmed that war crimes have been committed in Gaza. Perpetrators of these acts can and should be called out by all of us at every level, and politicians in our communities that say they represent us should do the same. We see universal condemnation in regards to what Hamas did, but this condemnation should not be conditional and for Palestinians alone. Where Israel commits breaches of international law, these violations should be called out and condemned. It should also be remembered that the situation did not come out of nowhere. This October the 7th was not the first thing that happened in the Palestine-Israel debate. Palestinians have been subjugated in the region for decades. That can't be forgotten. The impunity gifted to Israel for decades can be seen now with the current attack on Gaza. And I'll give you an example. We haven't been as lawyers calling for accountability and justice in Palestine since October the 7th, or this recent attack in Gaza. In 2009, I was a lawyer leading a legal team where a British court issued an arrest warrant for war crimes against Israeli Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni for her part in war crimes against civilians in Gaza. That was in 2009. The cycle of violence that we are seeing now did not start on the 7th of October. Now, Tzipi Livni even, was not prosecuted because the United Kingdom government worked so hard to protect her from accountability by issuing what was called a special mission immunity certificate. That was a significant cycle in protecting Israeli war criminals, or alleged Israeli war criminals, from accountability. And it's really important that we recognize that. That was back in 2009, over a decade ago. Israeli commentators have been warning about the danger of current far-right government and what it's been doing to Palestinians for the last couple of years. Israeli commentators told us that what we are seeing happening now was going to happen with Benjamin Netanyahu's government because he had joined forces with far-right actors in his government. And those actors put pressure on Palestinians in the West Bank, put pressure on Palestinians in Gaza, put pressure on Palestinians in Israel. And what we're seeing now is a failure of the political process in that region, which has led to another, not the first, another outbreak of catastrophic violence.
I mean, you're absolutely right. And I think what people are finding very difficult to digest right now is this kind of double standard of when does international law really apply and when does it not apply. And, you know, it kind of leads nicely into the next question, which is, I know that you've been sending a lot of letters to politicians regarding their complicit nature in war crimes. And just as we've been speaking, lots of people in the chat saying, well, doesn't this mean that so-and-so is therefore advocated for war crimes? So I think, you know, understanding now what it is and what it isn't, and what the law is very clear about, I guess it begs the question now, are our leadership and politicians essentially advocating for war crimes? Are they giving the green light? And what are the implications for that? Because I know obviously you can't just, that also in terms is a bit of an offense too.
Yeah, well, legal language is very specific, as you know. As lawyers, we labor over every word we say, and sometimes think we're speaking a different language. Hopefully, I'm not speaking a different language today, and people can understand what I'm saying. But political language is of a different order. It's something else altogether. Political language has the immediate power to change the direction of world events. It can cause people to die. It can cause lives to be saved. Simply spoken by politicians, it has an immediate effect on what people do, where they do it, and how they do it. And that's why we at the International Centre of Justice for Palestinians were gobsmacked, shocked, completely taken aback to see that politicians all around the world and in the United Kingdom appear to be irresponsibly, or at best ignorantly, greenlighting war crimes in Israel. So many members of our government and the Labour Party as well were clearly making statements that not only failed to condemn potential war crimes in Gaza, but were in fact encouraging them. Politicians were clearly stating that they supported Israel's unequivocal and absolute right to self-defense. And despite the United Nations and many commentators warning of the humanitarian catastrophe that would unfold in Gaza if Israel attacked, they remained mistakenly resolute to that position. So what we decided to do at the legal team in the ICJP was we decided to make politicians understand what their comments meant. And we decided to bring the law to their attention. In the context of war crimes, Article 25 of the Rome Statute makes it an offence to aid, abet, or in any way offer assistance, including encouraging a war crime. It was our view that what the British and other politicians were doing amounted to complicity in war crimes, and they could be prosecuted for it. So what we decided to do was to make politicians directly aware of it. So what we did was we served individual politicians, including in the government, including in the opposition, and we put them on notice that we intended to hold them directly responsible for the offences that they were committing, and sent notices that if they continued to be complicit in war crimes, by encouraging them, we would refer them to the police and or prosecute them ourselves. What happened after that was the narrative changed quite rapidly, and we saw politicians starting to realise that they had made this massive error. And we started to see some politicians, not all, some politicians trip over themselves to actually get the law right. And you've seen that at the moment. You've seen lots of social media commentary about where a politician has said one thing, then claimed he hasn't said it, and then later on another politician from the same party repeats the earlier mistake. And without having to name names here, it's very clear the kinds of people we're talking about. But we made the narrative change, but we still have some problems, and politicians are still making these grave mistakes. And some of the things that these politicians are writing in letters to the constituents is beyond disgusting, actually, where they're conflating civilians with militants on the ground in Gaza and effectively saying, well, you know, if they die, so what? And that kind of thing just can't be allowed. Now, the world is rapidly changing, and for my part, I don't want to support any politician. I'm going to say this again. For my part, I do not want to support any politician that is so politically blind that not only can they not bring themselves to do what's morally right, but they can't bring themselves to do what is legally right. We need better politicians. And if any politician claims not to understand what international law requires them to do, point to the Ukraine and say, you didn't find it there, did you, buddy? Right? And if you didn't find it difficult for the Ukrainians, why are you finding it difficult for Palestinians? What's the difference? We cannot afford for our politicians to ignore our voices on this issue, because if they don't hear us now on this issue, like I said earlier, they will not listen to us for generations to come. And it's incumbent on every single person listening to me today to make sure that they hold their politicians accountable for the things they're saying, hold their media accountable for the things they're saying, speak to their neighbors about the things that we're talking about, and make sure that people understand the difference between what is right and what is wrong.
Yeah, well, I think I think everybody on the chat has said well said and aptly put. And I think, you know, for many of us who have been watching, there have been some kind of jaw-dropping moments from our political leadership around things that are said, and really just quite unbelievable, to be honest, and their implications. And I guess the next question is really, you know, so what is the center doing about it? What are you doing about it? What can we do about it? I think maybe it'd be good for you to bring in the fact that it's still important to engage, obviously, but it's in terms of what does that engagement look like, that accountability look like. I know people are very frustrated, and there's still this kind of this idea, you know, like, what do politicians want? You know, this kind of loss of hope in terms of politicians, but they are still politicians. We can still hold them to account. But I think there's some legal tools also that you'll be wielding in terms of what else can we do about it, and how do we, like you said, the Ukraine example, such a powerful one for so many, because we can feel and see the difference. So I guess the question is, well, what are the plans in terms of what can we do about it, or what are you going to be doing about it next?
Well, I mean, ICJP is a very small unit. We've only been going for 2 years. We've been hitting way, way above our weight for the last 2 years. We have partnered on events with Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, many Palestinian groups, Al-Haq, to name one, which is something I want to talk about in a moment. So we have really made an impact so far in terms of the work we've done, but there's so much more to do. And, you know, this emergency situation that we're in now, we've launched a number of new initiatives, and there are a number of lawyers that I know that are listening here that are working with us at Bindlands as well as in ICJP to carry out legal action where legal action is appropriate. So I'm just going to run through a few of those. So at ICJP, we're supporting a judicial review by Al-Haq, Palestinian human rights organization, and Global Lawyers Action Network, which is a UK-based organization, against the Department of Trade. And that legal action is to try to prevent the Department of Trade issuing licenses for weapons companies to send weapons to Israel. And it's really important because the current weapons license criteria is not met by what Israel is doing. So there is good grounds that Israel is committing war crimes. We should not be supplying a country like that with weapons. And so we've actually lodged pre-action protocol in that judicial review, and that's with the Department of Trade, and we're waiting for their response. We intend to take them all the way through court if the Department of Trade doesn't cancel the weapons license. So that's an immediate, massive practical step that we've taken. We don't want British armaments to be enabling war crimes against the Gazans, against Palestinians in Gaza. It's that simple, and no right-minded person should want that either. We're continuing to remind politicians around the world, not just in the UK now, what the law is and how they should deal with that. When politicians are complicit in war crimes, we're writing to them to remind them of the law and tell them that we intend to prosecute them. Those hardened politicians that are continuing to break the law, or we think they're breaking the law, we intend to refer them to Scotland Yard in the first instance. If that fails, which it might, you don't know how active the police will be on these issues, we have the option of a private arrest warrant, and we also have the option of referring them to the ICC. Over the next few days, because there's so many issues with regards to protests, with people's employment, so many people are being infected in different ways because of what's happening in the war on Gaza. We're going to launch an advice support line. That's not really what we are designed to do, but we think because we're filling a gap in the emergency situation we're finding ourselves in, we need to give people in the community support when they fall foul of or they're attacked for whatever reason. So that's something else that we're doing. But most importantly, and this is really the purpose of ICJP, is we're engaged with people on the ground in Gaza, and we are currently gathering evidence with regards to the war crimes, so that we can build a file and bring people that are guilty of that or suspected of being involved in that to account. And people say, do you think it will work? Well, we got an arrest warrant for Zipi Livni. I can feel a change in the world environment, despite what our politicians and what Israel is doing. I think that what Israel is currently doing in Gaza is so massive that I don't think that even they can have impunity over what's coming. And if they start a ground war and 20,000 people die, which is a realistic possibility, and we're already on about 5,000 Palestinians that have died, I just can't believe that the international community would let that pass without an accountability structure coming. And let's not forget, the International Criminal Court has jurisdiction over Gaza. That's already a thing. So Karim Khan, who's a prosecutor, he's got an examination which is looking at the moment. We are supplying him with evidence, and he can intervene, as he did in supporting Ukrainian prosecutions in the Ukraine. He can intervene in respect of these war crimes in Gaza. And now we've got the Secretary General of the United Nations making it clear that war crimes are being perpetrated in that area. It's really important that we support this legal action. And if you want to read more, I don't want to take all out the remaining time. We have a couple of minutes left on this. But if you want to read more about ICJP, our website is ICJP Palestine. So it's icjpalestine.com. And you can read all about our work and donate to us. We need all the resources we can get.
Our team is going to put those links in the chat for you, inshallah. We definitely think people are really keen to support. We're coming to the last question, Tayab, and I'm going to double barrel it because there's some important things that have come in the chat that I think are important to share. So obviously, the critical question is, well, what is the solution? What can we do next? But I thought what would be really useful is bring the Home Secretary into this conversation, because we would be amiss without her involvement. Now, obviously, there is, I was speaking to the ambassador about it, there's a bit of a movement to curtail and stifle pro-Palestinian advocacy. And some people were saying, how much value is what the Home Secretary is saying matter when it comes to law? And can I wave my Palestinian flag? Can I protest? Can I chant? And I think we've got the kind of clarification on that. Yes, you can, but we're probably likely to see more from the Home Secretary in the coming days. I know there's more demonstrations planned, there's plenty more activism planned. So I think in terms of that, what is the solution? It'd be really helpful if you could bring in some of that for those people who do want to, continue to campaign, how to not be afraid. For some people, there's quite, their employers have maybe come down hard, or their social media is being watched. People are quite anxious, they're quite frightened as well. And I think maybe some kind of offer of reassurance, or just even being cautious and careful. The MCB's offered lots of guidance on that, which we'll share in the chat too. But maybe over to you, Tayab, in terms of those kind of heavier issues that people are really considering right now.
Well, I mean, Hussam explained how proud he was of the 300,000 people that were on the streets protesting. Very little, if not no violence at all. Complete respect for other communities. Don't fall for the hysteria and the propaganda and the nonsense that comes from certain political actors trying to marginalize the majority of Britain's voice. Most people in this country support the position for Palestinians and Palestinian rights. That's just a fact. And you can wave your Palestinian flag, you can attend a march. You should wave a Palestinian flag. You should attend a march. Now, of course, as individuals and as Muslims and as members of the British community, we have to do this with certain things in mind. So if you see somebody who's not from the same community as you, don't blame them for everything that is going on in Gaza. Don't, like Hussam said, there is a massive number of Jewish people in support of Palestinian rights, supporting my work. I deal regularly with Israelis on the ground in Israel, even now, that are supporting Palestinian rights and are talking in the most difficult circumstances in Israel against Israel's attack on Gaza. We've got to remember what Hussam was saying. This is not a Muslim-Jew issue. It's a right-wrong issue. And there are people on both sides of that, from all communities, that take different positions. And so when you're out on the street and you're protest respectfully, which I know everybody's doing anyway. Ignore the small group of people that are saying stupid things. That's not helpful. Hussam said that's not helpful. He's speaking on behalf of the Palestinian people. He's telling us that that's not helpful. So don't participate in that. And you have to be careful at your workplace, what you do at work, comply with your policies. I'm a lawyer at Bindman's. I run things past our what's called our senior leadership team when I have to do something, because I want to make sure that I comply with my work environment policy. There are different people in my work that work in different ways, and it's really important that you will respect other people. But going out on the street on a Saturday and protesting is crucial for us right now. And so you can maintain doing that. There's a very good legal team at Byman's that have issued a blog. One of my colleagues, Jude Lanchin, wrote a blog about what can be done and what your rights are with regards to protest. And that's worth reading. It's on the Byman's website. That's worth having a look at. And I say we'll be creating this advice line in the next few days. So if there are issues, people can ring in and get some advice. And Zara, just coming to your question, which is what is the actual solution? Well, let's repeat what Hussam said. The first thing that we need is our governments and politicians is to follow the will of the people and to call for an immediate ceasefire. It's really important. One question that I would want to ask any politician that is not vocally calling for a ceasefire is saying, why not? Because not calling for a ceasefire means that you are saying it's okay to watch people continue to be killed. The only thing that will prevent people being killed in Gaza and in Israel right now is a ceasefire. That's it. Simple. Once the ceasefire is agreed, which can happen tomorrow, we can negotiate all the rest of the stuff with Israel and Palestine, and they can discuss and they can have whatever agreement they want to have in the long term. But the immediate and most important thing is that we agree a ceasefire. Now, it's astounding to me that politicians are finding it hard to call for a ceasefire. I find that nefarious. I find that wrong. But at ICJP, we have been working to promote one simple concept. And if the international community believes, as it says it does, in international law and democratic principles and the rule of law, then they should apply that standard without bias, clearly and equally, and not just when it's comfortable for them to do so. Israelis, Brits, Palestinians, wherever you're from, we can all agree that the first step to peace in the region after the ceasefire is to create a system of rule-based accountability that is applied by the international community equally to Israelis and Palestinians. Once we remove Israel's impunity and people feel that they have accountability through the law for their grievances, then we'll be in a position where people find that there is an answer other than violence.
Perfectly put, Tayab. And I think everybody has really said thank you so much for offering that clarity. It's 100% right. I mean, we need to be hearing the ceasefire right now, immediately, and we need to be continuing to hold our politicians account. We're so thankful for the work that you're doing and that the work that the centre is doing. It's not easy. Please, if you can, do support Tayab's work. We'll be sharing links in the chat. We will also send an email out after this with the recording as well. I want to just thank on behalf of everybody at Team MCB for our guest, the ambassador, and also to yourself, Tayab, for coming on today and sharing so much that you have shared. Now, the Muslim Council of Britain is doing our best to advocate for the cause for the people of Palestine, and we will be continuing these community briefing sessions. We'd really appreciate if you can continue your support, and we'll send a link to donate, pledge, and support us, because obviously there's a lot to do, and we'd really like to continue that work for you. I want to thank everybody who's attended. We've had over 3,000 people register for this webinar and many more who I'm sure will benefit from the recording. Tayab, thank you so much for your invaluable experience, insight, and just very, very poignant and powerful way that you have reflected what you've reflected today. We hope and pray, because that's what we must do, to God, that inshallah things will be easier, things will hopefully ease for the people of Palestine and their struggle and all that they're going through. I want to thank everybody on the team who's put this together. Do check out our guidance, our website, mcb.org.uk. We'll be sending an email after this with the recording and some useful links and information. But from all of us at Team MCB, thank you so much. Good evening and assalamu alaikum. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.